Traditionally, we credit Egyptian craftsmen during the dynastic period with using bronze and copper tools, stone hammers, ropes and wooden rollers. Iron only started to be used around 1200 BC and was brought by the Greek Sea Peoples. What we claim these craftsmen created with these simple tools during the dynastic era defies belief. The vases found in Djoser's pyramid are made of granite, diorite, corundum. Corundum in its pure form is ruby, second hardest material to diamond. They make vases out of it. I mean, it's nuts. They also made vases out of lapis lazuli, very small. Incredible. Not only are these very hard materials, but in many cases, the vases were produced to incredibly fine thickness. Hello, everybody. Today we're going to talk about Egyptian artifacts, some enigmas and lost skills. But before we start today, just a little bit of marketing. If you're enjoying these videos, please subscribe, and then you'll get notice of future editions as they're published. And also, if you like them, push the like button. The material that I'm discussing is available both as a book, a printed book, and also as an ebook from all major booksellers. Right, so Today
we have a huge range of Egyptian artifacts, from buildings, jewelry, and we're going to talk about that.
Traditionally, everything unearthed in Egypt, there's obviously pre-Roman, is classified as dynastic. This is the period of recognized pharaohs, as in various king lists, the most famous of which was produced by Manetho around 275 BC. In fact, Manetho was the guy who came up with a classification grouping pharaohs into 30 dynasties, which we still use today, 2,500 years later. So he did some good work. And the period covered by dynastic Egypt is from the first recognized pharaoh, Menesh, who lived around 3150 BC, up to Cleopatra, who died in 30 BC. So it covers that sort of period of 3,000 years. However, nowadays, with fresh, trained eyes, engineers and stonemasons are challenging this assumption. Traditionally, we credit Egyptian craftsmen during the dynastic period with using bronze and copper tools, stone hammers, ropes and wooden rollers. Iron only started to be used around 1200 BC and was brought by the Greek Sea Peoples. What we claim these craftsmen created with these simple tools during the dynastic era defies belief. A few sessions back, we looked at mummification. This seemed to present clear evidence of an amazing trading network and incredible microbiological skills, many centuries prior to the first pharaoh. The recipes for mummification were refined and standardized centuries before the dynastic period. This suggests that skills ossified. Normally, man continues to improve, to tinker with them, to get it better and better. And yet, throughout the dynastic period, the recipe for mummification remained unchanged. It's as though skills were lost.
You're saying they went backwards?
It seems that way, and I think if we look at a couple of examples, in particular, stone columns and stone vases, we use the American pronunciation. The vast Egyptian temple complexes contain thousands of stone columns, varying in length from 8 meters up to about 25 meters. The columns fall into two distinct types. Columns made from sandstone blocks, carved discs stacked up one on top of each other, very clearly within the capability of craftsmen in the dynastic period, and columns of solid granite or basalt. For example, Tanis in the north of Egypt is littered with granite columns, mostly fallen and broken into pieces, which appear to have been manufactured as single columns, the majority being around 15 meters tall. The tops of these columns have beautiful palm leaf motifs, which increase the diameter of the column before it is dressed to around 2.5 meters. This suggests the original hewn slabs of granite, dimensions approaching 3 meters square and 15 meters long. A stone of this dimension would weigh around 340 tons. Apart from the precision of the finished product, the top and the foot of the columns clearly show central circular insets, which points to them having been turned on a massive lathe to be worked. The mind boggles at the idea of a lathe capable of holding and turning a stone weighing a few hundred tons. Could such a machine be constructed from hardwood and turned with a rope tied to a mule? How is this done? I tried to do some research and maybe I didn't get to the best products. It seemed to me that the best lathes that I could come across, German made, would be able to cope with an article weighing up to 7 tons. And these columns we think weighed up to 300 tons. More than that, if they were using copper or bronze chisels, these have very little impression on granite. And a simple objective experience, if you have a granite kitchen worktop, it's designed to be impervious to being scratched by stainless steel knives. So copper or bronze will have no effect on it at all. So what did they use to make these incredible columns? I've been unable to find data on how many single-piece granite columns have been found in Egypt, but clearly from what we can see today, there is evidence that many thousands were made. If these were crafted using hand tools, the work would have left very few hands to grow wheat. Therefore, some kind of mechanized process must have been available. Furthermore, the temple complexes that we can prove were built during the dynastic period use circular discs of soft sandstone stacked one upon another, as if the skill to work granite had been lost. Perhaps the labour cost had become too high. But the idea that Ramesses could not afford the labour cost of using granite columns in his temple, that sounds farcical.
So you can't explain how granite columns are made. What other examples are we going to discuss?
Well, I think the other really good example are the stone vases. Now, this is really interesting, and again shows even more clearly the degradation in skill. The step pyramid of Djoser, a 3rd dynasty pharaoh, ruling in the first half of the 27th century BC. Around, I think he reigned about 2670 BC, was found to contain over 40,000 stone vases. While some other discoveries are attributed to later pharaohs, it's conventionally thought that the production of stone vases ceased after this pharaoh, and none were made for around 17 centuries. That's nearly 2,000 years, until the 10th century BC. Later, from around the 10th century BC, we have evidence that alabaster vases were manufactured from gypsum and calcite, a much softer stone, far easier to work than those found in Djoser's pyramid. What stands out in the conventional explanation is that after 17 centuries, for further progress, presumably, in the development of Egyptian culture and skills, and the adoption of far softer stone to work, the finished product in alabaster is clearly far inferior to those found in Djoser's pyramid. The vases found in Djoser's pyramid are made of granite, diorite, corundum. Corundum in its pure form is ruby, second hardest material to diamond. They make vases out of it. I mean, it's nuts. They also made vases out of lapis lazuli, very small. Incredible. Not only are these very hard materials, but in many cases, the vases were produced to incredibly fine thickness. Sir Flinders Petrie, a British archaeologist who worked in Egypt during the first half of the 20th century, famously described a stone vase as having the thickness of a playing card. I expect he must have been exaggerating, but it gives a good impression of what he felt. And he was renowned actually as being able to accurately measure in his mind by looking at something. And then when they measured it, he was usually spot on. So when he said it was a playing card thick, it may have been pretty close to that, which is astonishing given the hardness of the material and the smoothness of both the external and the internal surface. How are these made? Conventionally, the answer is that the type of hand-turned wheel illustrated in the production alabaster vases for far softer material was also used to make these extremely hard stone vases. But that makes little sense. There is one claim relating to these vases which would be lovely to get verification of. There was excavations done at Toshka that yielded a stone vase containing some organic material, which, when it was radiocarbon dated, they came up with a date of 17,000 years of age. That takes it back almost to the beginning of the Dryas periods. On not hearing of that, I looked for evidence of carbon dating of anything found in the 40,000 vases under Djoser's pyramid, but only found comments that no permission for scientific analysis of any vases from there had ever been approved.
So these examples require professional knowledge. Do you have an example that would connect any DIY enthusiasts?
That's an interesting angle. Let me think. Yes, drilling, specifically tube drilling. Many examples of what appear to be drill holes have been found in ancient quarries and on the oldest artifacts. A number of factors stand out as quite extraordinary. The drill holes found in solid stone boxes in the recessed internal corners are often flush with the sides. Now, if you can imagine, they've found a number of massive stone boxes hewn from a single piece of granite, maybe 1 meter cube. Not only are the outside surfaces polished smooth to an incredible level, but the inside of the cube has been hollowed out, leaving perfectly smooth interior faces and bottom, and perfect rectangular corners. Beyond that achievement, the top edge has recessed in a part. So in a cross section, you're coming up like this and then down. In this internal recess, they've managed to make drill holes flush with the corners. Now, a moment's thought, if you're trying to drill a hole, you put the drill into your machine and you tighten the chuck. So it's almost impossible to drill a hole that is flush with recessed internal corners because the chuck has got to be bigger, greater diameter than the drill head. So how did they do that? Not only that, but the diameter of some of the holes that have been drilled into granite and basalt and diorite are up to 20 centimetres wide. I find that amazing. Also, the speed of drilling into granite has been calculated at up to 500 times what we achieve today with diamond-tipped drills. One of the artefacts brought to the British Museum by Flinders Petrie is labelled as core number 7, a brilliant label. It is the broken off core of a drilled hole. What caught Petrie's eye was the spiral groove around the core. He rightly recognised this attribute as quite extraordinary. Unlike modern drills that rotate at high speed and grind down the middle core of the hole, it appears that Egyptian technology drilled a circular hole, and then the core was somehow taken out, broken off. But this core contains a spiral that only rotates a few times per centimetre. Luckily, in the 19th century, there were not regulations such as there are today that would have prevented Petrie from picking up or taking away that core. Today, it's not possible even for non-invasive inspection of these holes to confirm whether that was the common practice. Always, when holes were drilled, whether they left these spiral grooves. I too was very dubious about the 500 times faster claim. I deduced that the claim is based upon the rate that the drill chews through the core rock. The Petrie core shows the groove cut by the drill cutting about 2 revolutions per centimetre. Modern diamond-tipped high-speed drills used on hard stone, after initially penetrating the surface slowly, are run at a range of speeds. I've seen quotes from 3,000 revolutions a minute up to 20,000 revolutions a minute. For ease of comparison, let's assume a modest 600 revolutions per minute. That's 100 revolutions per second. I don't regularly drill into basalt or granite myself, but I can regularly accept it would take 10 seconds to drill a depth of 1 centimetre. Thus, even with a relatively modest modern drill speed, it would take 1,000 revolutions of the drill to chew 1 centimetre of rock. That compares with the 2 revolutions indicated by the core that Petrie found. To penetrate these extremely hard stones as though cutting through butter makes one wonder if the technology was quite different. Maybe laser, maybe water, maybe sound waves. But the physical mark of the spiral groove would point to the use of a solid, hard material. A type of drill may be tipped with an alloy that we've not yet discovered. After watching this, I recommend other excellent videos examining stone cutting and stone polishing techniques that others have uploaded, which give an excellent coverage of more aspects of the technical enigmas presented by the conventional history of Egypt. After this, I think you may also now question whether all the Egyptian artifacts can be attributed to just the few millennia before Christ. Next, we will look into some puzzling aspects regarding the Sphinx and the Great Pyramids of Giza. Thank you.